The morning mist clung to the marble headstones like tears that refused to fall. Richard Montgomery stood before the pristine white monument that bore his daughter's name, his expensive Italian shoes sinking slightly into the damp earth. The cemetery was empty except for him and the groundskeepers who worked quietly in the distance, respecting the silence that surrounded the wealthy man's grief. Rose Montgomery had been dead for 6 months, but Richard came here every Tuesday morning without fail. His chauffeur waited by the black at the cemetery gates, knowing better than to disturb his employer during these sacred hours. Richard's usually commanding presence seemed diminished here, his broad shoulders curved inward as if carrying an invisible weight. The headstone was simple despite his wealth, had always preferred simple things. She had been 23 when the cancer took her, young and full of dreams that would never see daylight. Richard traced her name with his finger, the marble cold against his skin even in the warming sun. "I'm sorry, baby girl," he whispered, his voice cracking. "I should have been there more, should have listened when you said you weren't feeling well." The guilt ate at him daily. He had been in Tokyo closing a $1 billion deal when first complained of fatigue. His assistant had assured him it was just stress from graduate school. By the time he returned home, she was already in the hospital, pale and weak, the doctors speaking in careful, measured tones about treatment options and survival rates. Richard had thrown money at the problem like he always did. The best doctors, experimental treatments, private rooms that felt more like luxury hotel suites. But money couldn't buy what needed most time. The cancer had spread quickly, aggressively, and all his wealth could do was make her comfortable in her final days. From her position near the maintenance shed, Williams watched the grieving father with careful eyes. She had been working at cemetery for 8 years, and she had seen Richard Montgomery come here every week since his daughter's burial. At 62, had raised 4 children of her own and buried her husband 5 years ago. She understood grief in ways that most people never had to learn. Pushed her cart of cleaning supplies quietly between the headstones, staying far enough away to give the man his privacy, but close enough to observe. She had noticed things about Richard Montgomery that he probably didn't realize anyone saw. The way he brought fresh white roses every week, the same flowers had loved according to the florist's delivery card that had accidentally seen. How he talked to the headstone as if his daughter could hear him, sharing business victories and daily struggles with the marble surface. Most people thought was just another cemetery worker, invisible in her simple uniform and sturdy work boots, but saw everything. She had been cleaning the offices at Montgomery Industries for 15 years before taking this cemetery job. She had watched grow up from a distance, seen her visit her father's office during school breaks and summer vacations. Richard pulled a letter from his jacket pocket, the paper already wrinkled from his nervous handling. "I wrote to you again," he said to the headstone. "Doctor says it helps with the grieving process, but honestly, I don't think anything helps. The house is so quiet without you." His heart clenched as she watched him unfold the letter. She had seen him do this before, reading what looked like personal letters to his daughter's grave. The powerful businessman who commanded boardrooms and controlled millions of dollars reduced to a broken father seeking connection with his lost child. The letter trembled in Richard's hands as he began to read aloud. Dear, the foundation we talked about is finally getting started. The Rose Montgomery Foundation for Young Cancer Patients. We're funding research and providing support for families who can't afford treatment. I know you would have loved this project. Remembered mentioning something about wanting to help other young people facing cancer during her visits to the office. The girl had been passionate about making a difference, even while fighting her own battle. It seemed her father was trying to honor that passion now that she was gone. Richard continued reading, his voice growing stronger. I met with the architects yesterday about the children's wing at Mary's hospital. We're designing special rooms that won't feel so scary for kids undergoing treatment. Bright colors, gaming systems, art supplies. You always said hospitals were too depressing. A cardinal landed on his headstone, its bright red feathers a stark contrast against the white marble. Richard smiled through his tears. Your favorite bird? You used to say they were messengers from heaven. He reached into his pocket and scattered some sunflower seeds near the grave, watching as the cardinal hopped down to investigate. Had to turn away to wipe her own eyes. She had never seen such raw grief displayed so openly. In her experience, wealthy people usually kept their emotions carefully controlled, even in private. But Richard Montgomery held nothing back during these cemetery visits. His pain was genuine and profound, the kind of loss that changes a person forever. The cemetery began to fill with other visitors as the mourning progressed. Richard checked his expensive watch and sighed deeply. I have to go, sweetheart. Board meeting at 10, but I'll be back next Tuesday just like always. He kissed his fingertips and pressed them against his name one more time before walking back toward his waiting car. Watched him go, nodding the slight slump in his shoulders, and the careful way he composed himself before reaching the... By the time he slid into the back seat, the grieving father had transformed back into the controlled businessman the world expected to see. Approached grave after Richard's car disappeared down the winding cemetery road. She knelt beside the headstone, carefully arranging the white roses he had brought and cleaning away any fallen leaves or debris. This had become her routine, tending to his grave after Richard's visits, though he never knew about her extra care. Your daddy loves you so much, little one, whispered to the marble stone. He's hurting real bad, but he's trying to honor your memory. The foundation sounds beautiful. As worked, she remembered the times she had encountered at Montgomery Industries. The young woman had always been kind to the cleaning staff, learning their names and asking about their families. Unlike many wealthy people who treated service workers as invisible, had seen as a human being deserving of respect and kindness. During last year, when she had started feeling sick, had noticed the changes. The young woman had grown thinner, paler, often looking exhausted during her visits to see her father. Had wanted to say something, but her position as a janitor made such personal observations feel inappropriate. She regretted that hesitation now. The sun climbed higher in the sky as finished her work around his grave. She stood slowly, her knees protesting after years of physical labor, and gathered her supplies. The cemetery was busy now with mourning visitors, but the area around's resting place felt peaceful, almost sacred. Had secrets of her own regarding the Montgomery family, knowledge that might comfort Richard in his grief. But the divide between their worlds felt insurmountable. He was a billionaire CEO, and she was a cemetery groundskeeper who cleaned toilets and emptied trash cans. What could she possibly offer someone who had everything money could buy? Yet watching his weekly ritual of grief had touched something deep in his heart. She recognized the look in his eyes, the desperate need to maintain connection with a lost child. Her own son had died in Iraq 7 years ago, and she still wrote him letters that no one would ever read. Grief was grief, regardless of bank account balances. As pushed her cart toward the next section of graves, she made a decision that would change everything. Richard Montgomery needed to know that his daughter's kindness had touched more lives than he realized. His memory deserved to be honored by everyone who had known her gentle spirit, not just her grieving father. The maintenance shed became his thinking place as she stored her supplies and prepared for the rest of her workday. She had Richard's business card from her old job at Montgomery Industries, though she had never imagined using it. The idea of calling him felt presumptuous, even dangerous to her employment. But's memory gave her courage she hadn't known she possessed. Richards was long gone, but could still picture his broken expression as he read his letter to his headstone. A man with all the money in the world, yet powerless against the one enemy that couldn't be bought or negotiated with. Death had taken his most precious treasure, and no amount of wealth could bring her back. The afternoon shift was beginning at the cemetery, and its replacement arrived to take over the grounds keeping duties. She gathered her personal belongings and walked toward the bus stop, her mind already forming the words she would need to say. Montgomery had been a special young woman who deserved to have her story told completely, including the impact she had made on people her father never knew she had touched. As waited for the city bus that would take her back to her modest apartment, she thought about the letter she would write tonight. Not a letter to the dead, like Richard wrote to, but a letter to the living. A letter that might help a grieving father understand that his daughter's legacy was already spreading in ways he never imagined. The bus arrived with a wheeze of air brakes and diesel exhaust. Climbed aboard, dropping her fare into the collection box and finding a seat near the window. As the cemetery grew smaller in the distance, she could see the white marble headstones gleaming in the afternoon sun. Tomorrow she would return to her duties, tending the graves of the dead while serving the needs of the living. But tonight she would write the most important letter of her life. A letter that would bridge two worlds separated by wealth and circumstance, united by love for a young woman whose brief life had touched them both. Rose Montgomery's story was far from over, and Williams was about to make sure her Williams sat at her small kitchen table under the warm glow of a single lamp, a blank piece of paper before her and a well-used pen in her weathered hand. The apartment was quiet except for the distant hum of traffic and the occasional sound of her upstairs neighbor's television. She had been staring at the empty page for nearly an hour, trying to find the right words to begin. Writing had never come easily to. She had dropped out of high school at 16 to help support her family, and formal education had remained a luxury she couldn't afford. But tonight, she needed to find words that would matter, words that might help heal a broken man's heart. "Dear Mr. Montgomery," she finally wrote, her handwriting careful and deliberate. "My name is Williams. You don't know me, but I knew your daughter." She paused, wondering if she was making a terrible mistake. Richard Montgomery lived in a world of lawyers and security, where unsolicited contact from strangers was often viewed with suspicion. But's memory deserved this risk. "I worked as a janitor at Montgomery Industries for 15 years, continued. "I also work at cemetery now, where your daughter is buried. I have seen you visit her grave every Tuesday, and I want you to know that kindness touched more lives than you might realize." The words began flowing more easily as remembered specific moments with. The young woman had always stopped to chat when she visited her father's office, asking about her children and genuinely listening to the answers. During's husband's final illness, had quietly arranged for to receive paid leave that wasn't officially available to part-time cleaning staff. "Your daughter saved my job when my husband was dying," wrote. "She spoke to human resources on my behalf, though she never told me directly. I only found out later when the HR director mentioned Miss' personal request. That extra time with my husband meant everything to our family." His eyes filled with tears as she remembered Robert's last days. The cancer had taken him quickly, just like it would later take. But those final weeks at home together, made possible by intervention, had given closure and peace she never would have had otherwise. The letter grew longer as shared story after story, learning the names of all the cleaning staff and their families, bringing homemade cookies to the office during finals week, insisting that everyone who worked hard deserved a treat, organizing a collection among the executive staff whence grandson needed surgery, raising enough money to cover the medical bills couldn't afford. "She never wanted credit for these things," wrote. "Miss said kindness should be private, not public. But now that she's gone, I think you should know how many people she helped without asking for anything in return." The hardest part of the letter came when described's final months at the office. She had noticed the young woman's declining health before most people, seeing the exhaustion tried to hide and the pain she carried with quiet dignity. "I wanted to say something about her health," confessed in the letter, "but I didn't think it was my place. I regret that now. Maybe if someone had spoken up earlier, things might have been different." It was past midnight when finally finished writing. The letter was 3 pages long, filled with memories that painted a picture of character that her father might not have fully known. Read through it twice, making small corrections and ensuring every word was legible. The next morning, took an early bus to the Montgomery Industries building downtown. She had never visited during her unemployment, and seeing the towering glass structure brought back memories of early mornings spent cleaning offices and emptying waste baskets. The building looked the same, but felt different approaching it now, not as an employee, but as someone with an important message to deliver. Security in the lobby was then remembered. The guard asked for identification and the purpose of her visit, eyeing her simple dress and worn coat with obvious suspicion. explained that she had a personal letter for Mr. Montgomery regarding his daughter, but the guard shook his head. Mr. Montgomery doesn't accept unsolicited correspondence, the guard explained. You can leave it with me, and I'll see that it gets to his assistant. Hesitated. She had hoped to deliver the letter directly, maybe even speak with Richard personally. But she realized that was unrealistic. Billionaire CEOs didn't meet with former janitors, no matter how important the message seemed. Please make sure he gets it, said, handing over the envelope. It's about Miss, it's important. The guard took the letter with a noncommittal nod and walked back onto the busy street, feeling both relieved and anxious. She had done what she could. Now she could only hope that the letter would find its way to Richard and that her words would provide some comfort. 3 days passed before his phone rang at home. She almost didn't answer, recognizing the Montgomery Industries number from her years of employment. When she finally picked up, a crisp, professional voice greeted her. Ms. Williams, this is Mr. Montgomery's executive assistant. Mr. Montgomery would like to meet with you regarding your letter. Would tomorrow afternoon at 2 o'clock be convenient? His heart pounded as she agreed to the meeting. She spent the rest of the evening wondering what she should wear and what she would say. The idea of sitting in Richard Montgomery's office as an equal rather than a cleaning person felt surreal and slightly terrifying. The next afternoon, dressed in her best outfit, a navy blue dress she had worn to church services and her late husband's funeral, she arrived at Montgomery Industries 30 minutes early, spending the extra time in a nearby coffee shop trying to calm her nerves. Met in the lobby personally, a gesture that surprised her. The assistant was a well-dressed Asian woman in her 40s who treated with genuine respect and kindness. As they rode the elevator to the executive floor, explained that Mr. Montgomery had been deeply moved by the letter. He's been different since reading it, confided quietly. More hopeful somehow. I think your words meant a great deal to him. Richard Montgomery's office was exactly as remembered from her cleaning days. Massive windows overlooking the city, expensive furniture, and walls lined with awards and photographs. But now was seeing it from a different perspective, sitting in a leather chair across from the mahogany desk instead of emptying its wastebasket. Richard entered the office looking older than remembered, his hair grayer and his face marked by months of grief. But his eyes held something that hadn't been there at the cemetery, a spark of curiosity and perhaps gratitude. Ms. Williams, he said, extending his hand. Thank you for coming, and thank you for your letter. It's given me a different perspective on my daughter's life. They talked for over an hour, shared memories of that Richard had never heard, stories of kindness and compassion that revealed new depths to his daughter's character. Richard listened intently, occasionally asking questions or sharing his own memories that connected to stories. I knew was special, Richard said, his voice thick with emotion. But I didn't realize how many lives she touched. As her father, I saw her kindness at home, but knowing she extended that same caring spirit to everyone she met, it makes me incredibly proud. Found herself relaxing as their conversation continued. Richard was nothing like the intimidating businessman she had imagined. He was simply a father trying to understand his daughter's legacy and find meaning in her death. "There's something else," said hesitantly. "I've been working at the cemetery where is buried. I've seen you visit every Tuesday morning." Richard's expression grew guarded. "You've seen me there." "I tend the grounds in that section," explained. "I want you to know that I take special care of 's grave. After you leave each week, I make sure the flowers are arranged properly and that everything looks perfect. It's the least I can do for someone who was so kind to me." Richard's eyes filled with tears. "You've been caring for her grave all this time." Nodded. "She deserves to be honored, Mr. Montgomery. Your daughter made a difference in this world, and her memory should be treated with respect." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, both thinking about the young woman who had brought them together. Richard wiped his eyes and looked at with new appreciation. "Ms. Williams, I have a proposition for you," he said slowly. "I'm starting the Rose Montgomery Foundation, dedicated to helping young cancer patients and their families. Would you consider joining our board of directors? This foundation should include people who understood her heart for helping others." Was stunned. "Mr. Montgomery, I don't know anything about running a foundation. I'm just a cleaning lady." "You're someone my daughter trusted and cared about," Richard corrected gently. "You understand compassion and service in ways that matter more than business degrees or financial experience. We need your perspective on how to truly help people." As considered this unexpected opportunity, she realized that influence was still growing, still touching lives and creating connections across social boundaries. The foundation would be a living memorial to the young woman's spirit of kindness. "I would be honored," said finally. "Would want her foundation to help real people facing real struggles. I can help make sure we never lose sight of that." Richard smiled, the first genuine smile had seen from him since she started watching his cemetery visits. "Would love knowing that her foundation is bringing people together who might never have met otherwise." As their meeting concluded, Richard walked to the elevator personally, a courtesy that didn't go unnoticed by the staff. He handed her his personal business card with his direct phone number written on the back. "Please call me if you need anything," he said. "And may I call you? Thank you for seeing the way you did. Thank you for caring about her then and for caring about her memory now." The elevator doors closed, and found herself alone with thoughts spinning through her mind. In the space of a few days, her simple letter had transformed her from an invisible worker into a valued advisor to one of the city's most influential men. But more importantly, it had helped a grieving father understand the true scope of his daughter's impact. As rode the bus home that evening, she thought about, and the 6 months later, William stood in the marble lobby of Mary's hospital, watching as construction workers put the finishing touches on the new children's cancer wing. The Rose Montgomery Foundation had moved faster than anyone expected, turning grief into action with remarkable efficiency. Richard had thrown himself into the project with the same intensity he once reserved for business deals, but now his motivation was love rather than profit. The wing was everything would have wanted. Bright murals covered the walls, depicting fairy tale scenes and superhero adventures. Gaming systems and art supplies filled comfortable lounges where young patients could escape the reality of their treatments. Each room had been designed to feel like a bedroom rather than a medical facility, with soft lighting and cheerful colors that made the sterile hospital environment feel more like home. "I come see this," Richard called from across the lobby. He was standing next to a large bronze plaque that would commemorate the wing's dedication. His voice carried excitement that had never heard during his cemetery visits, the kind of enthusiasm that came from creating something meaningful. The plaque read, "The Rose Montgomery Children's Cancer Wing, in memory of a young woman who believed that kindness could change the world, one person at a time. Her legacy lives on in every child who finds hope within these walls." Below's name was a smaller inscription, "With special recognition to Williams, who helped us understand that true service comes from the heart, not the bank account." His eyes filled with tears as she read her own name on the memorial. "Mr. Montgomery, I can't believe you included me." "Richard," he corrected gently. "We've been working together for months now, and of course your name belongs here. This wing exists because you helped me understand what really valued." Over the past 6 months, and Richard had developed an unlikely but genuine friendship. Their shared love for had created a bridge between their different worlds, and their work on the foundation had revealed how much they had in common despite their vastly different backgrounds. Both had lost children, son in war, Richard's daughter to disease, and both understood that money couldn't heal the deepest wounds. The foundation board meetings took place in Richard's conference room, but they felt more like family gatherings than business sessions, had proven to be invaluable in keeping the foundation focused on its mission. When expensive consultants proposed elaborate programs that sounded impressive but wouldn't directly help sick children, asked simple questions that cut through the corporate complexity. "Will this actually make a sick child feel better?" became her standard question during planning sessions. Her perspective kept the foundation grounded in its original vision of practical kindness, rather than flashy charity work that looked good in newspaper headlines but didn't address real needs. Today marked the official opening of the children's wing, and families from across the region had been invited to tour the new facilities. Watched as parents and children explored the bright, welcoming spaces, seeing hope replace fear in their expressions. Young cancer patients who had been receiving treatment in the old, sterile pediatric ward now had access to amenities that made their difficult journey a little easier. "Mrs. Williams," a small voice interrupted its observations. She looked down to see a girl of about 10, bald from chemotherapy but wearing a bright pink headscarf covered with cartoon cats. "Are you the lady who helped build this place?" Knelt to the child's level, immediately recognizing the signs of ongoing treatment, the pale complexion, the thin frame, the tired eyes that seemed too old for such a young face. "I helped a little bit, sweetheart. What's your name?" "I'm Sophie. I have leukemia, but the doctors say I'm getting better. This place is so pretty. My old hospital room was all white and scary." Sophie's mother approached, a woman in her 30s who looked exhausted but hopeful. Sophie's been so excited about the new wing. Thank you for making this possible. The art room means everything to her. She loves to paint. I stood and shook the woman's hand. Thank you for letting us help. That's what this place is for. As Sophie and her mother continued their tour, Richard appeared at side. Moments like this make everything worthwhile, don't they? Nodded, watching Sophie skip toward the art room with more energy than most healthy children possessed. Would be so proud of what we've accomplished. This is exactly what she would have wanted. The official dedication ceremony began an hour later in the wing's main atrium. Local politicians gave speeches about community support and medical advancement, but the most meaningful moment came when Richard stepped up to the podium. Gone was the composed businessman who usually spoke at public events. Instead, a father shared his heart with an audience of families facing their worst fears. "My daughter died of cancer 8 months ago," Richard began, his voice steady but emotional. "She was 23 years old, brilliant and kind and full of dreams for the future. When we lost her, I thought her story was over. I was wrong." Stood in the front row, tears streaming down her face as Richard shared stories about character and vision. He talked about the letters he read at her grave, the foundation they had created, and the unexpected friendship that had helped him understand his daughter's true legacy. "The story didn't end when she died," Richard continued. "It continues every time we choose kindness over indifference, every time we help someone who can't help us back, every time we remember that our greatest legacy isn't what we accumulate, but how we treat each other." He paused, looking directly at. "I learned this lesson from someone my daughter befriended years ago, someone I barely noticed despite working in the same building. Williams reminded me that saw everyone as worthy of love and respect. This foundation exists because kindness created connections that outlasted her life." The applause was warm and sustained, but barely heard it. She was thinking about, wondering if the young woman could somehow see what her life had accomplished. The children's wing was beautiful, but the real miracle was how memory had brought people together across every barrier that usually divided them. After the ceremony, Richard and walked through the cemetery together for the first time. They had planned to visit graves separately as always, but somehow it felt right to go together today. The children's wing was officially open, and its foundation was beginning to change lives. It seemed appropriate to share this moment of triumph with the young woman who had inspired it all. This headstone was surrounded by fresh flowers from the foundation board members, hospital staff, and families who had already benefited from the new wing. Someone had left a hand-drawn picture of the art room, signed by a dozen young patients who wanted to thank for the beautiful space where they could forget about being sick for a few hours. "Look at all this love," said softly. "This grave has never looked more beautiful." Richard knelt beside the headstone, touching his daughter's name as he had so many times before. But today his touch was different, grateful rather than desperate, hopeful rather than heartbroken. "We did it, Em," he whispered. "We built something worthy of your memory, and I finally understand what you were trying to teach me about what really matters in life." Placed her own flowers beside Richard's, a simple bouquet of white roses that matched the ones he brought every week. "She knows," said confidently. "Somehow she knows what we've accomplished in her name." They stood together in comfortable silence, two people from different worlds united by love for a young woman whose brief life had left an indelible mark on everyone she touched. The cemetery was peaceful in the late afternoon sun, and its grave felt less like a place of mourning and more like a shrine to the power of human connection. "I have something to tell you," Richard said as they prepared to leave. "I've been thinking about stepping back from Montgomery Industries. The foundation work has shown me what I really want to do with the rest of my life." Was surprised but not shocked. Over the months of working together, she had watched Richard transform from a grieving businessman into a passionate advocate for children facing cancer. The foundation had given him purpose that his corporate success never could. "Well, what will you do?" asked. "I want to expand foundation nationwide," Richard explained. "Create children's wings in hospitals across the country, fund research, support families who can't afford treatment. I want to spend my remaining years making sure kindness reaches as many people as possible." Smiled, remembering the young woman who had quietly helped so many people without seeking recognition. She would love knowing that her father finally found his true calling. As they walked back toward their cars, Richard made one more surprising announcement. "I want you to be the foundation's executive director. You understand vision better than anyone, and you know how to keep us focused on what really matters." Stopped walking, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what Richard was offering. "I don't have the education or experience for that kind of position." "You have something more valuable than credentials," Richard insisted. "You have heart, wisdom, and a genuine commitment to helping others. Those are the qualifications that matter for foundation." 6 months ago, Williams had been a cemetery groundskeeper watching a billionaire grieve at his daughter's grave. Now, she was being offered the chance to lead a foundation that would impact thousands of lives. Influence had created opportunities that neither nor Richard could have imagined. "Yes," said finally, "I'll do it, for all the children who need hope." As they reached their cars, Richard turned back for one last look at its grave. The headstone caught the golden light of the setting sun, making the white marble seem to glow. Flowers covered the ground around the monument, evidence of how many lives had touched and continued to touch through the foundation. "I think I understand now why you were watching me all those months," Richard said to. "Brought us together for this purpose. She knew her foundation would need both of our perspectives, my resources, and your wisdom." Nodded, feeling the truth of those words in her heart. Sometimes the most important meetings happen in the most unexpected places. They drove away from the cemetery together, not as strangers divided by wealth and circumstance, but as partners united in purpose. Rose Montgomery's story had become bigger than her brief life, spreading outward through the foundation that bore her name and the friendships she had inspired. The billionaire no longer wept alone at his daughter's grave. He had found peace in continuing her work, and he had found friendship in the woman who had silently tended memory. Williams was no longer invisible, recognized now as a guardian of legacy and a leader in the Foundation's mission. His grave would still receive weekly visits, but now they would be celebrations rather than mourning rituals. The white roses would continue to mark Richard's love for his daughter, but they would also commemorate the ongoing work being done in her name. Love had triumphed over loss, connection had overcome division, and kindness had proven to be the most powerful force of all. In the end, Rose Montgomery had accomplished exactly what she had always intended. She had changed the world, one person at a time. Her story would continue to unfold through every child helped by her foundation, every family supported in their darkest hour, and every act of kindness inspired by her example. The young woman who had died too soon had achieved a form of immortality that no amount of money could buy. Foundation that would carry her name. The young woman's legacy was just beginning, and Williams had become an unexpected guardian of that legacy. Sometimes the most important connections in life came from the most unexpected places, bridging worlds that seemed impossibly far apart. Her knew it.